What happens when you cross a Facebook keyboard warrior, drama creator, and moon landing denier?
Gen X reacts.
Meet Action's Nyama. Or at least their avatar, so bear in mind this may not be what they really look like. They felt the urge to write a schoolboy essay about why the Apollo moon landing was fake. Probably.
Alright, let's break this down even further, because the more you dig into it, the more things stop making sense. The Apollo 11 moon landing in 1969 is one of the most iconic events in human history, but when you start analyzing the details, it sometimes looks more like a well-directed show than a real space mission. Did they actually set foot on the moon? Possibly. But is what they showed on TV 100% real? Well, that's where the doubts begin.
Okay, let's dig deeper into this. This Facebook post reminds me of when flat earthers say such and such isn't real because it doesn't add up or it looks odd to them, without actually researching the answers for themselves. Well, in case you're also too busy to look things up, let me go over a few things for you and rid any doubt you may have. I can't believe we have to do this in 2025 when all this is easily available, but here we go. 2 members of the Apollo 11 crew landed on the moon in 1969 on July 20th, while the third stayed on the command module orbiting the moon. This is what is known, so let's go through these doubts of yours.
The first red flag is the quality of the footage. This was 1969, when TV broadcasting technology was still in its infancy. People had trouble getting a stable signal just a few kilometers away, yet NASA supposedly managed to broadcast live video from the moon nearly 400,000 kilometers away. And not only did they succeed, but the footage looks like classic black and white low-budget sci-fi. Then NASA later admitted that they lost the original tapes. Seriously? The most significant event in human history, and they didn't keep the original recordings? That's like Leonardo da Vinci misplacing the Mona Lisa and saying, "Oops, I don't know where it went."
Okay, so firstly, I'm not sure what classic low-budget sci-fi you've been watching, but as most sci-fi from that era was filmed for cinema, the quality was actually pretty good. A lot was also in colour, but to get a really bad quality film for comparison, let's go all the way back to a very early sci-fi film called Metropolis and compare footage. Maybe you need a better TV if your image is as bad as the Apollo footage, as you can clearly see that even in 1927 the image is both clearer and is more defined, though one is filmed on Earth and one is filmed on the moon. What you appear to be comparing is apples and oranges, so maybe you can find a better analogy for me to look into. Let's look more into how that moon footage was captured, and hopefully it will explain why it looks so rough by today's standards. There was an intense debate within NASA about whether a television camera should be carried in Apollo 11's lunar module, as it would add weight to the spacecraft. Eventually, a black and white Westinghouse camera with a 16mm lens was approved. The development of a TV camera to transmit signals to Earth became one of the additional flight objectives of the mission. The Apollo missions were incredibly complex, with multiple space vehicles performing intricate maneuvers in deep space which required accurate tracking at extreme distances. The equipment had to be designed to withstand the extreme cold, heat and radiation they would experience, and for Apollo 11 they also needed to transmit more data than previous NASA missions, including television and video. Hundreds of employees in Scottsdale, AZ, began developing the United S-band transponder in 1962, a new system that would accurately track the Apollo spacecraft, transmit and receive telemetry signals, communicate between ground stations and the spacecraft, and provide the link for the historic broadcast from the surface of the moon. The formal contract was awarded in 1963 in Motorola's Government Electronics Division, a legacy company of General Dynamics. The signal would be sent from a dish on top of the lunar lander and was erected and unfolded after the landing. The S signal was picked up by Houston and 2 sites in Australia, Parkes and Honeysuckle, but it was Parkes which captured the best images due to its superior image quality, and it was this that was beamed via Intelsat orbital satellite to dishes around the globe for television. One of the dishes was Goonhilly's Dish Arthur in the UK, a small 26 metres compared to Parkes' 64 metre dish, but we're still able to receive the satellite transmission clearly. The signal was transmitted via microwave to the Post Office Tower, now called the BT Tower in London, and distributed to regional networks from there. Hardly surprising picture was grainy and hard to make out after all that, but the event is well documented and achievable. As for that missing data, well, yeah, some of the telemetry data was overwritten in the 80s when budgets were tight and NASA still needed to record what was happening with its Jet Propulsion Laboratory. But don't get confused here. The Apollo 11 data is what was beamed into people's living rooms around the world via television stations, so the NASA backups weren't seen as being all that important. In the 80s, it was only realised that some of the original data had been overwritten because there was a research desire to show the Apollo moonwalk in higher resolution than that of the live broadcast. The original tapes were a higher resolution to what was publicly broadcast, but by then it was too late and some of it had been overwritten and no longer available. So it's more like Leonardo painting over some of his other works to do new works, which artists do often. But was it an oversight of NASA to not predict the ability to store all its data on something like a digital hard drive 40 years later? And is it a reason to say it was fate? Not really, but it was a big feck up in my opinion. They've since been using digital technology to enhance the footage.
Okay, Neil, we can see you coming down the ladder now. Okay, Neil, we can see you coming. Okay, I just checked getting back up to that first step. It's that isn't collapsed too far, but that's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Then there's the Eagle lander itself. It supposedly descends onto the moon's surface, firing a rocket engine just a few meters above a layer of fine lunar dust. And what? No crater, no displaced dust, no scorch marks from the rocket exhaust. Anyone who has seen a helicopter land on a sandy surface knows what should have happened: dust everywhere, a blown-out area underneath. But here, nothing. It looks as if someone just placed it there by hand. The landing pads are suspiciously clean, as if they just rolled out of a factory, even though they should be covered in dust. NASA explains this by saying that lunar dust settles quickly because there's no atmosphere, but come on, it still looks strange.
Okay, so looking closely we can see some discoloration under the lander, but the rocket engine wouldn't have been blasting a crater into the surface because it was turned off before the lander, landed. Dave McKeegan has a video from 2023 where he explains this in much more detail, but here's a short clip. I recommend watching the whole thing.
Now, the procedure was that as soon as the contact light was called, the commander would hit the engine stop button, and that would immediately stop the throttle on the engine.
Steady. 9. Shut down.
At that point, the lunar module's feet are still 5 foot off the floor, and they freefall that last little bit, which is fine because they're only in 1/6 of Earth's gravity. But it means that the feet themselves didn't hit the ground until well after the engine had stopped kicking up dust. As for the claim that there should be all that kicked up dust settling back down over the lunar module, let's consider the environment.
A dust cloud on Earth is suspended in the air for a long period of time due to the atmosphere on Earth. On the Moon, there is next to no atmosphere to suspend the dust in, so it would have been thrown further away before it settled, leaving very little below the lander on touchdown. Hence the feet of the lander wouldn't have dust fall onto them. So nope, it doesn't look strange. It looks as expected. Let's listen to your next issue.
And of course, the famous flag. In a vacuum, there is no air, so the flag should just hang motionless. But in the footage, you can clearly see it moving as if there's wind. NASA says it's because of vibrations from when they planted it into the ground, and since there's no air resistance, those vibrations had no way of dissipating. Maybe that's true, but visually, it looks weird, almost as if a light breeze is hitting it. Conspiracy theorists love this moment because it makes the whole thing look like a staged film set rather than an actual moon landing.
Oh, geez, that's great. Is the lighting halfway decent? Yes, indeed. They've got the flag up now, and you can see the stars and stripes on the lunar surface. Up now, and you can see the stars and stripes on the lunar surface. Beautiful, just beautiful.
You gave the explanation in your query and still said it was odd. That is called denial, especially when that description from NASA is accurate to all known laws surrounding motion.
The lighting is another suspicious detail. Shadows in the photos don't all go in the same direction, which suggests multiple light sources. The problem is, on the moon, the only light source should be the sun, meaning all shadows should be parallel. Yet in the photos, shadows are cast in different directions, as if multiple lights were used just like you would expect on a movie set. Supporters of the moon landing was faked theory often point to this as one of the biggest giveaways, because this effect shouldn't naturally occur in an environment with just one light source.
So we're back to this one. The shadows on the moon. This has been looked at by lighting experts and debunked so many times.
The moon's surface itself is very bumpy, very lumpy, lots of craters and mountains, things like that. So the sun, when it bounces off that surface of the moon, it can sometimes bounce off in a few different directions caused by all those uneven surfaces. And this makes some of those shadows look like they're coming from perhaps different directions that you're not expecting. Additionally to this, there is actually a little bit of light that we receive on the moon from the Earth itself. Some of the sun's light will bounce off all those blue oceans, and that will cause something called Earthshine, which also illuminates the moon a little bit from another direction.
Thanks, Anna. Another easy explanation which cannot be disputed, only denied by reality deniers. Let's see what's next. And supposedly it's the best part.
Now for the best part, how did they even get back to Earth? The Ascent module fires up a small rocket and miraculously perfectly docks with the orbiting command module, which is flying hundreds of kilometers above the surface. And they managed to do this in an era when computers were less powerful than a modern-day calculator. The whole thing looks suspiciously flawless, like a sci-fi movie script where everything must go right on the first attempt. If anything had gone slightly wrong, there would have been no way to rescue them, yet somehow, everything worked down to the second.
The lunar module jettisoned in space and aligned itself into the orbital path and was picked up by the command module. It was pretty easy to explain, but even easier to understand with a little CGI. Yep, CGI, because there wasn't an external camera film in this bit.
On return from the moon, the docking procedure is carried out again. This time, the lunar module pilot can also align the lunar module by aligning it with a lit target in the command module window. The docking procedure and capture happens in the same order as previously carried out.
However, this is what was done, and those clever nerdy boffins at NASA had run all the numbers to ensure it was possible. You know when you say it's not rocket science because it's easy? Well, this is rocket science, and it isn't easy. You have to be bloody clever to get this right. How people are not able to find this out for themselves is beyond me. If you think it's weird and it doesn't feel right, maybe it's too much for you to research it further and should stay off the internet altogether.
And now we get to the key question: could the Americans have technically gone to the moon? In theory, yes, because rocket technology was advanced enough to get them there.
Well, that's done then. What, you have more after that?
But was what they showed the world 100% real? That's a whole different story. Maybe they really did go, but the footage was faked because the real video was too poor in quality or looked unimpressive. Or maybe they never went at all, and the whole thing was staged in a secret film studio just to beat the Russians in the space race and flex their technological superiority.
Hold up. I don't mind explaining things for people, but this what if, maybe, woulda, coulda, shoulda is turning into a clown show. I already know you're going to talk about Kubrick, so carry on. But bear in mind, Kubrick finished 2001 in 1968, and it took him 4 years to make. He was also a perfectionist, and that grainy-looking video we have of the moon landing would not have been good enough for Stanley. But carry on.
I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that.
I'll have to listen to the rest of this then.
Conspiracy theorists often point to filmmaker Stanley Kubrick, who was working on 2001, A Space Odyssey at the time and had access to the most advanced special effects of the era. Some even claim that NASA hired him to direct the fake moon landing, and that he later left clues about it in his film The Shining. Sounds like a crazy internet conspiracy, but some people take it very seriously. Was it all a hoax? Hard to say, but one thing is certain: there are so many weird inconsistencies surrounding the Apollo 11 mission that it's difficult to believe the official story without having some doubts. If NASA really landed on the moon, why has no one been back in over 50 years? Why, in the 21st century, with technology light years ahead of what we had in the 60s, can't we simply repeat the mission? Why are we still only sending robotic probes instead of humans? These are the questions that NASA never gives satisfying answers to.
No, these are the questions moon landing deniers are stuck on because they cannot accept reality. This piece from Action Nayama is more like a high school essay than an actual skeptic sounding out. They already had their presupposition and needed to keep sticking in that element of doubt with every topic raised. I believe they know the answers and wrote this because they wanted the attention and accolade, but were too scared of being ridiculed from making actual clear claims. If ever a fence was sat on, it's in this piece. In conclusion, there's no actual reason to doubt the moon landing of Apollo 11.
There's far too much evidence from around the globe and its differing countries supporting the event.
But the internet has created a wide range of deniers out there not ready to accept reality. So even if we went back and did it again today, they would quickly shout fake. There's no pleasing some people.